My son laid a hand on me inside my own kitchen, and I didn't say a word. But the next morning, when he came downstairs thinking I just accepted his disrespect, he froze in sheer terror when he saw who was sitting at my dining room table. I was sitting at the head of the table, smoothing out the white linen tablecloth Helen had bought for our 20th anniversary. When Kevin walked into the room with that swagger of his like he owned the world, he hadn't even noticed the dark purple bruise spreading across my jaw. He was so focused on himself, already reaching for the basket of fresh biscuits I'd been making since 3 a.m. He grabbed the biggest one, took a huge bite, and started talking about how things were going to change in this house now that I understood how things really worked. But the words died in his throat when the chair next to me scraped against the hardwood floor. His face, which had been flushed from last night's drinking, turned the color of old newspaper, like he'd seen a ghost walking through our front door. The biscuit fell from his hand and crumbled across Helen's good china plate, then scattered onto the floor. He knew in that 1 second that my silence the night before hadn't been fear or acceptance. It had been a verdict. But for you to understand how we got to this breakfast that felt more like a courtroom than a family meal, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Gerald Thompson. I'm 58 years old, a widower, and I live in a modest 2-story house in Norfolk, Virginia. You know the kind of neighborhood I'm talking about: working folks, small front yards with chain link fences, American flags on most of the porches, and everyone knows everyone's business. That's been my world for the past 30 years. I've always been a straightforward man. Worked 35 years on the assembly line at the Ford plant until they offered early retirement packages in 2019. Decent pension, decent benefits, nothing fancy, but enough to keep the lights on and the mortgage paid. I raised my son Kevin mostly on my own after my Helen passed from a massive heart attack 4 years ago. She was only 52, just getting ready to enjoy the empty nest years we'd planned for so long. Helen's death hit both of us like a freight train, but I thought Kevin and I would pull through it together. Man, was I wrong about that. The trouble started maybe 6 months after we buried Helen. At first, I told myself Kevin was just grieving in his own way. He'd moved back home after college to help Dad out, which sounded noble enough. But helping out turned into hanging out, and hanging out turned into hanging around doing absolutely nothing while I paid for everything. Kevin's 29 years old now, stands about 6 feet tall, got his mother's dark hair, and unfortunately his grandfather's taste for the bottle. For the past year and a half, he's been between jobs more often than a substitute teacher. Always had an excuse. The boss was unfair. The work was beneath him. The pay wasn't worth his time. Meanwhile, I'm buying groceries for 2, paying utilities for 2, keeping the cable and internet running so he can play his video games and scroll through social media all day. But it wasn't just the money that was eating at me. It was the disrespect that came with it. Kevin started treating me like I was the guest in my own house. He'd take my truck without asking, come rolling in at 2 or 3 in the morning, slam doors, leave dishes in the sink for days. When I tried to talk to him about it, he'd give me this look like I was some old fool who didn't understand how the modern world worked. Dad, I'm going through a rough patch, he'd say, sprawled out on my couch with a beer he'd taken from my refrigerator. You can't expect me to just bounce back from losing Mom like nothing happened. And every time he played that card, I'd back down. Because he was right, we had both lost Helen, and maybe I was being too hard on a grieving son. The money thing escalated gradually. First it was, Dad, can you spot me $200 for gas and groceries? I'll pay you back when I get this new job. The new job never materialized and the $200 never came back. Then it was $400 for car repairs. Then $600 to help a friend who was really struggling. Always something, always urgent, always temporary. But last month I discovered it wasn't just the cash he was asking for. I was sitting at the same kitchen table trying to figure out why my credit card statement was so much higher than usual. The balance had jumped from maybe $300 to over $340 in just 2 months. I went through every charge, line by line. Xbox Series X, $509. Gaming chair, $400. New computer, $100 delivery charges for DoorDash nearly every day. Charges at GameStop, Best Buy, Amazon. Hundreds of dollars I never authorized for things I'd never seen. My hands were actually shaking when I realized what had happened. Kevin had been using my credit cards without permission, just taking them from my wallet when I was sleeping or in the shower, memorizing the numbers, ordering whatever he wanted. When the packages arrived, he'd grab them before I got home from my morning walks. That's where I was at 2 a.m. this morning, sitting in my kitchen with all those credit card statements spread out on Helen's kitchen table, trying to figure out how my own son had been stealing from me for months. That's when Kevin came home reeking of beer and cigarettes, spoiling for a fight he was about to get. The front door slammed so hard the whole house shook. I heard Kevin's keys hit the hall table, followed by the sharp crack of something breaking. Had to be Helen's ceramic angel. the one her mother gave her before we got married. Kevin didn't even pause to see what he'd destroyed. He stumbled into the kitchen, and when he saw me sitting there with all those credit card statements laid out like evidence at a crime scene, his bloodshot eyes went from confused to angry in about 2 seconds flat. "What's all this?" he said, gesturing at the papers with the kind of dismissive wave you'd give to a fly buzzing around your face. I looked up at my son, really looked at him. His hair was greasy, his clothes wrinkled and stained. He had that sour smell of someone who'd been drinking cheap beer for hours and sweating it out on the walk home. This wasn't the clean-cut boy who'd graduated high school with honors. This wasn't even the young man who'd cried at his mother's funeral and promised me he'd help keep her memory alive. "Kevin," I said, keeping my voice level, "we need to talk about these charges. This Xbox for $509, this gaming setup for $1,200, all these food deliveries. I never authorized any of this." His face flushed red, but not from embarrassment, from anger. "That stuff's mine. I need it for my job search, for staying connected. And what's wrong with eating? You want me to starve? Job search?" I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. "Son, you haven't filled out a job application in 3 months. You spend 12 hours a day playing games and watching videos. You don't know anything about how the world works now. Old man," he snapped. "Everything's online. Networking, applications, interviews. I need good equipment for that." I picked up the credit card statement and rate off some of the charges. DoorDash, $47 for Thai food. Another DoorDash, $38 for pizza. Grubhub, $52 for Mexican. "Kevin, there's $400 worth of delivery charges here just from last week. We have a kitchen full of groceries I paid for." That's when his whole demeanor shifted. The fake justification fell away and what was left was pure entitlement. "This is my house too," he said, pointing a finger at me. "Half of everything here is mine when you're gone anyway. So really, I'm just spending my own money." The cold calculation in his voice hit me like a slap, like he was already planning my funeral and dividing up my stuff. I stood up slowly from the kitchen chair, my joints creaking from sitting too long with the bills spread out in front of me. "Kevin, this is my house, my credit card, my money that I earned working 35 years at that plant. You're 29 years old. Maybe it's time you got your own place and started taking care of yourself." That's all it took. Those words were the trigger that released whatever demon had been growing inside my son for the past year. He came at me fast, faster than I expected. 1 second, he was standing by the refrigerator. The next, he had both hands on my shoulders, gripping me so tight, I could feel his fingers digging through my old flannel shirt into the muscle underneath. "You don't tell me what to do," he snarled, his face inches from mine, his breath reeking of beer and something rotten. "You're nothing without me. Who's going to take care of you when you can't take care of yourself anymore? You need me more than I need you, old man." He started shaking me then, hard enough that my teeth rattled and my reading glasses flew off my face and skittered across the linoleum floor. I felt like a rag doll in the hands of an angry child, except this child was 6 feet tall and stronger than me. "Kevin, stop," I managed to say. "You're hurting me." But he wasn't listening. His eyes had this glassy, distant look, like he was seeing something else entirely. Like I wasn't his father anymore, just an obstacle in his way. "I'm sick of your lectures," he yelled, shaking me harder. "I'm sick of you acting like you're better than me. You think you're so smart with your little bills and your little rules? Well, guess what? I don't have to listen to you anymore." That's when he let go and shoved me backward with both hands, putting his full weight behind it. I went flying across the kitchen like I weighed nothing at all. My back hit the edge of the counter so hard I heard something pop in my spine. Pain shot through me from my tailbone to my shoulders, and I gasped, trying to catch my breath. But Kevin wasn't done. As I tried to steady myself against the counter, still seeing stars from the impact, he stepped forward and backhanded me across the face with an open palm. The crack echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side, and I tasted blood immediately where my teeth had cut the inside of my cheek. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Me leaning against the counter, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth, and him standing there breathing hard like he'd just finished a workout. His fist was still clenched, and for a second I thought he was going to hit me again. Instead, he just looked at me with this expression of complete contempt, like I was something disgusting he'd found stuck to his shoe. "There," he said, his voice suddenly calm and cold. "Now you know how things really work around here. Next time, maybe you'll think twice before trying to cut off my money." Then he turned around and walked out of the kitchen like nothing had happened. I heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs, heard his bedroom door slam shut. Within 10 minutes, I could hear him snoring. I stood there in my kitchen for a long time, leaning against the counter where Helen used to make our morning coffee, tasting blood and feeling something fundamental shift inside me. I went to the little half bathroom under the stairs and looked at myself in the mirror. The face staring back at me was a stranger's. My left jaw was already swelling up. turning that ugly purple-black color of a fresh bruise. There was a cut on the inside of my cheek where my teeth had scraped against the skin, and dried blood crusted the corner of my mouth. But it wasn't the physical damage that shocked me. It was the look in my own eyes. For the first time in 4 years since Helen's funeral, I saw something I'd forgotten was there. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind that Kevin had just shown me, but something cold and calculating. The kind of anger that plans ahead. I washed the blood off my face with cold water, patted the cut dry with a clean towel, and made a decision that would change both our lives forever. This was the last time Kevin would ever lay a hand on me. The last time he'd steal from me. The last time he'd disrespect the house Helen and I had built together. I walked back to the kitchen and started cooking.
It sounds crazy, I know. But cooking was the only thing that kept my hands from shaking and my mind from going to dark places I didn't want to visit.
I pulled out ingredients for everything Kevin had loved since he was little: buttermilk biscuits, thick-cut bacon, cheese grits, scrambled eggs with chives from Helen's herb garden. While I worked, mixing dough and heating up the cast iron skillet Helen's grandmother had passed down to us, I made 3 phone calls that would set everything in motion. The first call was to Beverly Martinez. Beverly lives in the blue house next door, been my neighbor for 15 years. She's 67, retired from the federal bench after 25 years as a judge. Sharp as a tack, doesn't suffer fools, and has 0 patience for people who think they're above consequences. She answered on the second ring. Beverly, it's Gerald. I need you to come for breakfast at 8:00 sharp tomorrow morning, and I need you to come as Judge Martinez, not as my neighbor. There was a long pause. Beverly's not stupid. She could hear something in my voice. Gerald, what happened to your voice? You sound different. He hit me, Beverly. Kevin hit me in my own kitchen. Another pause, longer this time. When Beverly spoke again, her voice had that courtroom authority I'd heard her use when she was still on the bench. Where is he now? Sleeping it off, upstairs. I'll be there at 8 Chasgrav. And Gerald, you're doing the right thing. The second call was harder. Carl Rodriguez has been a friend since we were both young men trying to make our way in Norfolk. He worked his way up from beat cop to detective over 20 years, earned every promotion through hard work and integrity. Carl knew Kevin as a boy, remembered when he was polite and helpful. This call was going to break his heart almost as much as mine. Carl, it's Gerald Thompson. I need you to come to my house tomorrow morning at 8:05. Official police business. Gerald, it's 3:30 in the morning. What kind of official business? Domestic assault. I'm filing a complaint against my son. The line went quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Carl, you there? Yeah, I'm here. Gerald, are you sure about this? Sometimes family situations can be worked out without involving the law. Carl, he's been stealing from me for months, using my credit cards, taking cash from my wallet. Tonight, he shoved me into the counter and hit me in the face. I'm 58 years old and I've got bruises to prove it. If this was anyone else's kid doing this to anyone else's father, what would you tell them to do? Carl sighed, a heavy sound that carried 20 years of dealing with domestic violence calls. I'd tell them to press charges. Gerald, this isn't standard procedure, meeting for breakfast. Usually we'd send a patrol car immediately. I know it's not standard, but Carl, you know my family. You knew Helen. You've watched Kevin grow up. If squad cars show up here with lights flashing, the whole neighborhood's going to think I'm dying or the house is burning down. I want to handle this with dignity. Can you do this one favor for an old friend? 8 to sharp, he said. Finally, I'll bring Officer Martinez, Lisa Martinez, Beverly's niece. She's good people, handles domestic situations well, but Gerald, if you're in any danger before then, I'm safe until morning. Kevin drinks until he passes out, then sleeps like the dead until noon. I've got maybe 8 hours to get ready. The third call was the hardest one. My brother Lawrence lives up in Chicago, works construction when his back allows it. Larry's 61, 3 years older than me, and the only family I have left besides Kevin. We don't talk often, but when we do, it matters. Larry, it's Gerald. Gerald. What the hell time is it? This better be good. It's not good. Larry, Kevin hit me tonight. I'm calling the police in the morning. I heard Larry's wife Sarah in the background asking what was wrong. Larry covered the phone and said something to her, then came back on the line. That little son of a bitch. I knew this was coming, Gerald. I could see it the last time we visited. The way he talked to you, the way he acted like he owned the place. What are you going to do? I'm going to have him arrested. Domestic assault, elder abuse, theft. I've got evidence of everything. Good, it's about damn time. Gerald, I know this is hard, but that boy needs to learn there are consequences in this world. You want me to drive down there? No, but I appreciate the offer. I just wanted family to know what I was doing before I did it. You're doing the right thing, brother. Helen would be proud of you for finally standing up to him. After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by the smell of bacon grease and fresh biscuits, planning the most important breakfast of my life, because it wasn't going to be just a meal, it was going to be a trial, with me as the prosecutor, Beverly as the judge, and Carl as the bailiff, and Kevin was going to be the defendant, whether he knew it or not. By 7:30 a.m., my dining room looked like something out of a magazine. Helen's white linen tablecloth covered the oak table we'd bought for our first apartment 32 years ago. Her good china, the set with the tiny blue flowers that her mother had given us for our wedding, was arranged perfectly at 4-place settings. The silver cutlery I'd polished the night before gleamed in the morning sunlight streaming through the front window. I'd made enough food to feed a construction crew. Buttermilk biscuits, golden brown and flaky thick bacon crispy enough to snap, cheese grits creamy and rich, scrambled eggs light as clouds. The coffee was strong and hot, the way Helen always made it. Everything Kevin had grown up eating, everything that represented home and family and love. At 7:55, Beverly knocked on my front door. She was dressed in a navy blue suit, her gray hair pulled back in a perfect bun, carrying the leather briefcase she'd used in federal court for 25 years. She looked every inch the judge she'd been. And when she saw my face, her expression went hard as granite. "How bad does it hurt?" she asked, studying the purple bruise spreading across my jaw. "Not as much as my pride," I said. "Thank you for coming, Beverly." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me after we're done here." At 800 exactly, Carl arrived with Officer Lisa Martinez, Beverly's niece, and one hell of a good cop from what I'd heard. Both were in plain clothes, but I could see the handcuffs clipped to Carl's belt under his jacket. I led them to the dining room. Beverly took the chair to my right, Carl to my left. Lisa positioned herself near the kitchen doorway where she could see the stairs. The trap was set. At 8:05, I heard Kevin's alarm go off upstairs. He'd set it because he had some job interview at a warehouse, his first real prospect in 6 months, probably planning to ask me for gas money on his way out the door. I heard the shower run, heard him moving around up there getting dressed. At 8:15, his footsteps started down the stairs. Heavy, careless steps. The walk of someone who thought he owned the world. Kevin rounded the corner into the dining room, already reaching for the coffee pot, humming under his breath. That's when he saw them. The color drained out of his face like water down a bathtub drain. His mouth fell open, but no sound came out. His hand, which had been reaching for coffee, just hung there in midair like he'd been frozen in time. "Morning, son," I said calmly. "Have a seat." He couldn't move, just stood there staring from Carl to Beverly to me, his brain trying to process what he was seeing. "Kevin," Beverly said, her voice carrying all the authority of 25 years on the federal bench, "please sit down." He sat, hard, like his legs had given out on him. Carl opened his notebook and looked at Kevin with the expression of profound disappointment that only a cop who's known you since childhood can manage. "Kevin Thompson, I'm Detective Rodriguez, Norfolk PD. We've received a complaint of domestic assault from this address. The complainant is your father, Gerald Thompson." Kevin's eyes snapped to me, wide with panic. "Dad, what are you doing? This is insane." "It was just an argument. Families fight sometimes." I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out my phone. I'd bought one of those security camera systems about a month ago, the kind that records everything to your phone. I'd been worried about Kevin bringing strangers into the house, but it had caught something much more important. I pressed play on the video from last night. Kevin's voice came through the speaker, clear as a church bell. "You don't tell me what to do, old man. You're nothing without me." Then the sound of him hitting me, sharp as a gunshot. The room went dead silent, except for the ticking of Helen's grandfather clock in the corner. Beverly leaned forward, fixing Kevin with a stare that had made hardened criminals confess their sins. "Kevin, I remember when you were 12 years old, helping your mother plant flowers in that garden out front. You used to call me Aunt Beverly and bring me cookies at Christmas." Kevin's eyes were filling with tears. "Where did that boy go?" Beverly continued. "The one who cried at his mother's funeral and promised to take care of his father?" Carl stood up, pulling the handcuffs from his belt. "Kevin Thompson, you're under arrest for domestic assault and elder abuse." As Carl read him his rights, Kevin looked at me with the first real fear I'd seen in his eyes in years. "Dad, please, I'm sorry, I was drunk, I'll get help, I promise." I stood up slowly, my back still aching from where I'd hit the counter. "Son, I've heard that promise before, too many times." Carl gently turned Kevin around and cuffed his hands behind his back. My boy, my only child, standing in our dining room in handcuffs. "I love you, Kevin," I said as they led him toward the door, "but I love myself too much to let you destroy us both." He started crying then. Real tears for the first time since Helen's funeral. "Dad, I'm scared." Good, I said. Maybe being scared will teach you what I couldn't. Kevin got 4 months in county jail and 18 months probation. Court ordered anger management and job training. He had to pay back every penny he'd stolen, $4 and $3,847, 747. It's been 14 months now. Kevin lives in a small apartment across town, works construction, and we meet every other Saturday for coffee at Murphy's Diner on Coley Avenue. Our relationship isn't the same as when he was little. That blind trust is gone forever, but what we have now is better in some ways. It's honest, it's respectful, it's real. Sometimes love has to be tough to be true. The greatest gift a parent can give their child isn't unconditional forgiveness. It's teaching them that love has boundaries, and crossing those boundaries has real consequences. I didn't destroy my relationship with my son that morning when I called the police. I saved it by refusing to let him destroy himself and me along with him.